today I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted.
I know some of you are thinking, what is Trump doing? This is actually not as bad as you might think. The WHO should have its funding suspended and pending an investigation. They failed to do the very job they're in place to do. And instead of taking action back in January, they downplayed the effects of the coronavirus. They did this on behalf of China. And they stood behind Beijing when they said travel restrictions were unnecessary. Here's a conference that took place back on February 3rd.
There is no reason for measures that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade.
And the problem with this is many countries rely on the advice from the WHO, and because of this, they didn't implement travel restrictions against China. This effectively helped spread the virus. The WHO was slow to respond, and they didn't declare this a pandemic till March 11th. They even ignored early warnings from Taiwan back in December. Then going to January 31st, they attacked Trump for taking immediate action and implementing travel restrictions against China. This was the right move and it did save lives. Here's Trump on April 14th.
One of the most dangerous and costly decisions from the WHO was its disastrous decision to oppose travel restrictions from China and other nations. They were very much opposed to what we did. Fortunately, I was not convinced and suspended travel from China.
And this right here is Tedros' response to Trump's travel restrictions.
We call on all countries to implement decisions that are evidence-based and consistent. WHO stands ready to provide advice to any country that's considering which measures to take.
The WHO waited till March 11th to declare this a pandemic. It was in 110 countries by then. The whole point of this organization is to prevent pandemics, not to stand idly by and wait till there's a pandemic, then declare as a pandemic. They failed, and they failed miserably. Here's Trump.
There was credible information to suspect human-to-human transmission in December 2019, which should have spurred the WHO to investigate immediately.
I don't want to break your hearts, but Trump was correct. There was previous knowledge of human-to-human transfer, and it could have been early as November 2019. The earliest known COVID case was November 17th. China had knowledge of the pandemic, and they covered it up by arresting and threatening whistleblowers. Then on January 24th, a new study was released from The Lancet, whose authors were the Chinese researchers and doctors who worked on the front lines at a Wuhan hospital. The study suggests that human-to-human transfer did occur earlier than Chinese officials admit. It is the WHO's job to immediately investigate and to collect virus samples at critical times. Instead of calling China out on their lack of transparency, Tedros praised China. A WHO is supposed to be an independent organization that collects data and assists countries on behalf of the world, not support the political agenda of totalitarian regimes.
The world depends on the WHO to work with countries to ensure that accurate information about international health threats is shared in a timely manner, to independently tell the world the truth about what is happening. The WHO failed in this basic duty and must be held accountable. It's time after all of these decades.
Then here's Tedros, the hypocrite, telling Trump not to politicize the virus.
Please don't politicize this virus.
And the reason this is hypocritical, Tedros, because the WHO is supposed to be a world organization, but denies membership to Taiwan. WHO is playing into China's political agenda. They won't even allow observer status to Taiwan. Here we have a Canadian director at the WHO that won't even acknowledge the existence of Taiwan.
Would the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
This is so sickening. It looks like he reached over to close the conversation, and if that's not bad enough, adding insult to injury, when they called him back, he referred to Taiwan as China. He won't even say Taiwan's name, and he wished them luck in Hong Kong, which is a separate state altogether.
We decided to give Dr. Alward another call to follow up.
And I just want to see if you can comment a bit on how Taiwan has done so far in terms of containing the virus.
Well, we've already talked about China, and when you look across all the different areas of China, they've actually all done quite a good job. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us to participate, and good luck as you go forward with the battle in Hong Kong.
And here's Taiwan's heartfelt response to the WHO.
I would like to publicly call on the WHO to recognize a simple fact that Taiwan is Taiwan and it is not part of the PRC. Taiwan is not under China's jurisdiction. Taiwan's and China's health are administered by separate and independent health authorities. And Taiwan's and China's flight information regions are administered by separate and independent civil aviation administrations. This is such a simple reality.
They're refusing to help a country on behalf of Beijing and boldly refusing to acknowledge the existence of Taiwan. Then they're repeating Chinese propaganda. Dr. Alward wasn't just caught in a bad moment on Skype. Here he is again, sucking up to the Chinese government.
A phenomenal collective action and cooperation by the people of China to this response. To the people of Wuhan, it is recognized the world's in your debt, and when this disease finishes, hopefully we'll have the chance to thank the people of Wuhan for the role that they've played in it.
Of course, Taiwan has been slamming the WHO for its mishandling of the virus. Instead of the WHO accepting that mistakes were made, they decided to go in a tit for tat with Taiwan. And Ted Rose went so far as accusing Taiwan of being racist. Listen to this.
And if you want me to be specific, 3 months ago, this attack came from Taiwan, giving me names, black or negro. They even started criticizing me in the middle of all that insult and slur.
And I would take Ted Rose seriously if these allegations were credible, and Taiwan denies ever saying anything like this. If Ted Rose was so worried about racism, why isn't he standing up for the African community in China? Currently, there are many reports of racism taking place, with Africans being arrested and not allowed back in their homes. Chinese businesses were ordered not to serve foreigners, with businesses specifically refusing to serve Africans. They go so far as posting signs in front of their businesses saying they will not serve blacks.
Africans are being targeted because of fears they could spread coronavirus. A recent rise in COVID-19 infections in China has been linked to people from abroad. The Chinese government is worried there could be a second wave and has stepped up its scrutiny of foreigners. African students and expatriates have reportedly been evicted from their homes, tested for coronavirus several times, and are being shunned in public. The incidents have sparked a diplomatic row with the African Union, African governments, and the United States.
What makes me sad is, I said it last presser, when the whole black community was insulted, when Africa was insulted, then I don't tolerate. Then I say people are crossing the line.
So when Ted Rose virtue signals for the African community, it's really hard to take him seriously. And he is politicizing the virus by engaging in this nonsense. By acting on Beijing's best interest, the WHO put the whole world in danger. One important fact mainstream media missed is that WHO did have knowledge of human-to-human transfer in January and didn't advise on travel restrictions till after the Chinese New Year. This effectively helped spread the virus as hundreds of millions travel in and out of China. This was incredibly irresponsible, and then they go as far as to praise China for its transparency and tactics for managing the virus. Here's our friend Dr. Alward on China.
But when you start doing all of this, which are the interventions, then you can, ideally try and change the shape of that. And that's what China has actually done. To my surprise, as much as it was one of those things that, when you spend 20, 30 years in this business, it's like, seriously, going to try and change that with those tactics? And yes, and it was successful.
So this is great. The Chinese government is able to flatten the curve and control the virus. Dr. Aylward couldn't help but admire the Chinese government for their tactics. So what tactics did the Chinese government employ? They're dragging people out of their homes into quarantine centers. They're throwing citizens into boxes. They're sealing residents in their houses by welding their doors shut. This is cruel and unusual punishment. Citizens in China are hiding the fact that they're sick in fear they'll be dragged off into a quarantine center, which will make problems worse, not better. FYI, the quarantine centers are those wonderful hospitals they hastily built. In these makeshift hospitals, it doesn't matter if you're COVID-19 positive or just suspected of having COVID-19. You're grouped together in small quarters. And by the way, they don't separate those who are suspected of having it from those who are actually positive. I can't think of a worse situation to be in. What are Chinese authorities thinking? And most of all, what is the WHO thinking this is okay? Here's some footage of the Chinese hospitals. This really is nothing to be proud of. These are makeshift hospitals that are set up like a relief center for a flood, not an infectious disease. This would be a perfect environment for COVID-19 to spread. These hospitals really are just paper tigers. The numbers that are coming out of China can't be trusted. So we really have to ask ourselves, can we trust the WHO? Here in Canada, our top doctor, Dr. Theresa Tam, followed advice from the WHO and put Canadians in danger by doing so. Back in January, Dr. Tam was telling us we shouldn't close our borders to countries with high levels of infections and was repeating the talking points coming out of China, saying back in January there was no evidence of human-to-human transfer. It's not like there wasn't data available. Like I said earlier, there was a study released by The Lancet that showed clear evidence of human-to-human transfer back in December. While China was clamping down on whistleblowers, all sorts of vital evidence was flowing freely out of other countries, that is, including Taiwan and South Korea, making it evident there was indeed human-to-human transfer. However, since Taiwan's not a member of the WHO, because that would upset Chinese leaders, its important medical evidence was not accepted. Dr. Tam ignored it at the peril of every Canadian. I should also mention that Dr. Tam worked as an international expert on a number of WHO committees. Here in Canada, she's currently the Chief Public Health Officer and essentially has become the interim Prime Minister through this crisis. Her decisions have a profound impact on what steps we take going forward. It is concerning that she is more focused on following advice from the WHO than actually doing her job and protecting Canadians. And you know what? That must be a pretty easy gig. Just wait for what the WHO has to say and just do that. What are we paying Dr. Tam for? And Dr. Tam should be held accountable just like the WHO. The WHO has been around since 1948 and it has a lot of successes under its belt. I do believe we need an organization like this in order to properly respond to outbreaks. they really do have a great set of people working for them, and it's just a couple bad apples. However, the issues are coming from the highest levels in the organization, and recently they have come under a lot of scrutiny for their mishandling of the Ebola outbreak. Specifically, Ted Roos needs to be investigated. Ted Roos was the previous health minister of Ethiopia and has a history of covering up pandemics. According to evidence, we are seeing the effects were downplayed of COVID-19. Not to mention, it was incredibly irresponsible not to recommend travel restrictions till after the Chinese New Year. Trump is doing the right thing by holding the WHO accountable. The WHO appears to have been corrupted by Beijing, and because of this, they put the world in the midst of a pandemic. They withheld information at critical times. The very countries they're supposed to protect are now worse off. I hope this episode helps you guys understand why the WHO has had its funding suspended. These allegations are credible, and it's not just a smear campaign by Trump like Global News has claimed. Mainstream media is letting Canadians down by not asking the right questions. If anyone's looking for a trusted news source, I do recommend the Epoch Times. As for myself, I really want to keep making these videos, and I can't stress this enough. I really need your help. Facebook is making it hard for me to promote my videos, so I please ask that you hit like, subscribe, and please, for the love of God, share my video. Thanks, guys. I wish you all the best.